Okay, gang, so last week we started our journey into the O side of IO psychology by discussing motivation. Today, we'll continue our O side journey by discussing another important topic in IO psychology, and that is attitudes, emotions, and work. By the end of today's lecture, I'd like for you to be able to define attitudes and list components of attitudes. We'll spend quite a bit of time on job satisfaction, so I'd like for you to be able to understand what job satisfaction means in IO psychology and be able to summarize two major theories of job satisfaction. We'll talk about the major consequences of job dissatisfaction and ways of overcoming them. Then we'll talk about the concept of something we call organizational commitment, the major consequences of low levels of organizational commitment and how to overcome them. Then we'll talk about something that I really like to study and have done some research in, and that is psychological contracts. And then finally, we'll round out our discussion by defining emotions and distinguishing them from attitudes. And then we'll finally talk about the effects of emotions on behaviors in organizations. The following two clips show different stories about the Washington, D.C. sniper. Some of you may recall that this is a couple of individuals who went around the Washington, D.C. area and they killed a number of people using sniper tactics, and it was a very dangerous and scary time for a lot of people. We'll post these clips for you, and we use these to illustrate the types of emotions that can be involved when people are at work, because some of these shootings occurred at work. But you don't need to watch both clips. I'll let you know that at work. Take a look at the emotions involved in one of the specific incidents with the DC snipers. It reads, October 3rd, 2003 began like any other workday at the Fitzgerald Auto Mall in Kensington, Maryland. Shortly after 7 o'clock that morning, two men chatted outside. One was Gary Huss, the body shop manager, and the other was Sonny Buchanan, who was prepared to mow the grass at the dealership. They each went about their business, but 20 minutes later the unthinkable happened. Mr. Buchanan was shot and killed by an unknown assailant, the Washington area sniper. In the hours and days after the killing, the employees of the car dealership expressed a wide range of emotions. Some were irritable. One of the managers reported, I was ticked, I was grouchy, everything bothered me. Kay Varner, a receptionist, was feeling guilt because she had continued answering calls at the switchboard rather than running to Buchanan to help stop the bleeding. Gary Huss said that he felt it was his responsibility to be strong for his employees and not let his emotions show. Even customers were affected. If their repairs were not completed on time, they told employees, it's okay, I know what you're going through. Many employees were diagnosed as suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm sure that you would all agree that life is full of emotions. So in any given day, we can be perhaps ticked off by drivers on our commute to work. We might be stressed out by our boss. We might be amused by one coworker, angry at another coworker, or perhaps even proud about praise from a boss or someone else. One important thing for us to remember is that emotions at work can affect both our work behavior and non-work related behaviors. In addition, non-work related emotions can affect both our work and non-work behavior. So there really is a reciprocal relationship among all of these different constructs. But let's move on and talk about a definition for attitudes, since we're going to spend our time today talking about attitudes. You can think of an attitude as a relatively stable cluster of feelings, beliefs, and behavioral intentions toward specific objects, people, or institutions. Now again, keep in mind that we're talking about components of attitudes that are feelings, beliefs, and behavioral intentions. Work-related attitudes then, by extension, are simply attitudes that relate to any aspect of work or work settings. Now, any attitude that you're discussing is usually discussed in terms of attitudes towards something. In addition, any attitude you're describing can be characterized by three components, as I said earlier. These components are the evaluative component, an emotional component, and a behavioral component. The evaluative component is simply what we know about a particular attitude. The emotional component, on the other hand, is how we feel affectively about the attitude in question. The behavioral component, finally, is how we behave in regard to the attitude. Let's use an example to illustrate these components. Let's say that we're interested in discussing the attitude towards workplace romance. An example of the evaluative component of the attitude towards workplace romance might be something like this. I think workplace romance is an unacceptable form of behavior at work. The emotional component of the attitude towards workplace romance might be, I feel angry that people date others from the workplace. And finally, the behavioral component of the attitude towards workplace romance might be that I would sign a policy that penalizes individuals who engage in workplace romance. So where did the study of attitudes get started? Well, the beginning of this was a very famous study called the Hawthorne study. The original study at the Western Electric Company was interested in examining the relationship between physical aspects of work and performance. So what they would do was they would vary a number of physical aspects of the environment. For example, they would change the illumination of lighting. They would change the number of breaks that they provided employees. And they wanted to see if those changes would have any relationship or effect on the performance of employees. And what they found was kind of odd. No matter what they did, no matter how many times they changed the number of breaks they had or changed the lighting, the employees, their work resulted in increased performance. And because of this original study, and the finding that, well, what they found was really interesting here. What they found was that the employees were being affected by the attention that was being paid to them. So it had nothing to do with the illumination of lighting or the breaks. The employees were being affected by the fact that these researchers were paying attention to them. Eventually they did some follow-up studies, and what they learned was that management should pay more attention to workers, and if they did that, that worker satisfaction increased. And they could attribute that increase in performance just to satisfaction. And because of the original study and the finding that researcher attention increased job performance, management just basically began to pay more attention to workers. And as I said, satisfaction increased. And because the satisfaction was increased, performance also increased, which was very important. Of course, the main finding here was that perceptions were way more important than physical work conditions, which was a huge finding at the time and not something that people knew a lot about. I'm going to quit here, and then we're going to talk about job satisfaction in just a second. See you in a second.